So I spent the afternoon watching music on YouTube to try and calm myself down. He's unmuted himself, so shouldn't start the program. He's muting himself again. Now that's good. Can't get the staff. And I ended up watching lots of Billy Joel records, or Billy Joel, if you will. So here's an introduction for everyone. I, of course, River of Dreams, that's the River Calder. John, of course, is an innocent man, despite what some Toronto fans will believe. Danika, Uptown Girl or Always a Woman, which would you prefer?
Oh, Uptown Girl.
Uptown Girl, yeah. And Phil, he didn't start the fire. He didn't light it, but he tried to fight. Constant.
I prefer honesty.
We can have honesty if you want. Can we get him to do the grand final this year, even though no one might be there? How are we all? I feel it's been another interesting weekend in the returning story that is Super League.
It's been entertaining. Shall I just leave it at that?
Concise. John?
Yeah, it's a weekend in the Super League, isn't it?
Phil?
It's been lots to admire, but we haven't been able to talk about it enough again.
Well, I tell you what. Probably to annoy Sam Tompkins, who seemingly doesn't understand how the media works. I'm sure he'll be never appearing on Sky or the BBC again when they come calling. Let's start with the rugby, and let's start with probably the result of the weekend, and that was the superb result for the Salford Red Devils, 54-18. Against Hull FC. Not the best of start to Andy Last's career in charge of the early birds, John. And Salford, well, it could have been all too hard for them this year, having won, or made it rather, to the grand final this year, but certainly put some critics in their places with that result on Sunday.
Well, you always wondered how it was going to turn out for Hull, didn't you? With their pack, and they're built for, well, they're not built for the new rules, are they? So I think everyone thought that was going to turn up a few new tricks for them, but yeah, all credit to Salford, and they looked great as well, didn't they?
They did look great. Are you concerned yourself about these new rules? Obviously, as a forward, no scrum when you get to play at some point in the future.
If we can, yeah, like scrums are. I think scrums it's a rest, isn't it? And two, I don't think I'm going to do too well with the 6 again rule. I'm just going to put it out there right now.
You're going to be breaking through the line like Regan Grace.
I mean, have you just put me and Regan Grace in the same sentence?
Yes.
Well, I'm just going to stop it there. I'm going to take that. That's fine. You mean speed and prowess?
Something like that. Grace. That's what I was saying. Well, Grace. Yeah, there's the word.
Yeah, Grace. I mean, that's also a new word, but I'll take that too.
Sticking out of this hole, John, Salford, they were really good.
Yeah, they were outstanding. It's great to watch. Played with a lot of freedom, a lot of abandon. Execution was excellent. And yeah, the new rules definitely seem to suit the way they play, the way they move the ball. And Tuilagi here had probably one of the best games of his career, I would say.
Certainly the best game he's ever played at Headingley.
Yeah.
Wow.
Say that. Yeah. I'm probably more worried about just Leeds and the Broncos as well. I hope he's okay.
Phil, Tuilagi about his fights at Leeds. Obviously, well last year. Continue to do so now.
I think put that down to Ian Watson. I think he's found a role for him that suits him. I think the way that he played on Sunday was reminiscent, I think, of the way that he's played for Tonga. So he clearly can play at the highest international level. I think you've got to have players around you that complement your style and can take the pressure off you. And just love what Joey Lussick does. He never gets the credit. I mean, even though he was absolutely brilliant last year and a deserved Man of Steel, Jackson Hastings wouldn't have been as good as he was without Joey Lussick inside him. His service out of dummy half is magnificent, as good as anybody's in the league. And Chris Atkin looked very lively as well. So, Lolla here's great strength. it's not speed, is it? It's ability to read a game, to put the right kick in, to support when he needs to. If he's got a guy around him that's going to do the stuff that he can't do, then it's a great mix. I just love the way Salford play, and I think, you know, we're only in week one for virtually every team, and as we saw with Catalans, that St Helens apart, who've begun at a level that is so far above everybody else, you can't read too much in it until teams have played at least 2 games. 1, to see how they've come back from lockdown, and 2, to see how they cope with the new rules. So the Catalan of last week was not the Catalan of this week. It may well be that Hull, having learnt from the way they played this week, will be better next week. What I would say is Salford are going to have to go to replicate what they did, and their game against Catalan is shaping up to be a beauty next Saturday. But no, I thought Salford were magnificent. I thought the way they played, the expansiveness, the lightness of foot as well. They didn't necessarily go for power. Luke Yates is another classic example. He's quite a squat prop forward, but he's got a great engine, and he's not an Alex Walmsley type of prop. He's not going to go over the top of you, but he's going to work harder than you are for all the time that he's on the field. And that allied to some really good finishing from, you know, like Sir Rhys Williams. He's look at his stats. He is a top-class finisher. Give him half a chance and he will score. There's a great balance about that Salford team. And Hull looked incredibly one-dimensional, which I think was the worry that we spoke about last week, that they've recruited a certain way, that they began quite well, but quickly ran out of steam, and they still haven't solved, with 5 months off, the issue of should Jake Connor start and control the game or come off the bench, because again it did not work.
We still don't know what Jake Connor is, John, do we? Because obviously Hull don't know what he is, Andy Lass doesn't know what he is, and he's obviously a very talented player, but no one knows where to play him.
Yeah, I think talent's one thing, but if he doesn't realise that talent or maximise it, if he doesn't realise his potential, then it's a bit of a waste, and you haven't really seen him do that throughout his whole career consistently. So it's quite a shame, and I think for Hull, if they are going to do anything this season or in the future, they need him to really step up and be a performer every week. You know, he's not doing that, and as Phil said, I mean, I think it was a pretty disappointing performance from nearly every in every manner for Hull, and you have to worry about them the rest of the season now.
As a supporter of a team who tends to hang around at the same part of the table as Salford, I think say with confidence that they are a rag bag of players that perhaps have been rejected from elsewhere, Danika. And what do you make of the job Ian Watson does in terms of his ability to meld everyone together and get much more of the sum of their parts than the parts themselves? Well,
you know, I think that's the weird and wonderful thing, isn't it? This break that's going to be the test of the teams, I think, this break, and for anybody as well. And it's how well you've kept a track of your players, you've kept a track of your team, what have you been instilling in them whilst they've been out. And I think that's kind of, you know, Ian Watson's we've seen last year, you know, he can bring that team together, and what's he been doing over the off period. But I think, I don't know, am I being, from a player's point of view as well, the whole situation of this weekend, you know, we're essentially having lots of mini magic weekends now until the foreseeable, which is changing the time, you know, an earlier kickoff changes all your prep, the heat, you know. I'm still kind of going to go with the fact that the Catalans, you know, they train in that regularly, don't they, anyway? But in general, you know, what have you been doing on the off-season? How things have been going in the off-season? How are you adapting and getting your players ready for different kickoff times that might affect the prep? And, you know, for a lot of players, prep starts good 24 hours beforehand anyway. And then, you know, the travel and everything like that. So it's just, you need somebody. I think he's quite a cool, calm and composed guy generally, isn't he? So maybe, I don't know, maybe that was the edge. Maybe it was in, you know, not working for Hull because of their recruitment, because of the game now and how it runs. And, you know, Salford, like you say, their forwards aren't huge and bouldering, but once they can move that ball well enough. So if all the forwards need to do is set a nice little platform for the backs to play off the back out of. So I think that will work in their favour. But like you say, next week's going to be a really interesting contest to see who comes out of it.
I don't want to extrapolate anything out of 1 week, Phil, as we did last week, and extrapolate the whole of the game with the new rules. You said the start of the whole topic. The rules have changed now. They obviously don't suit the squad. They haven't had a full-time appointment as coach, but whoever is in charge can't change. The players are there.
I think the issue for Hull is that apart from Scott Taylor, virtually everybody was fit. They actually made a selection decision about who they wanted their halfbacks to be, who they wanted to go with in their starting pack, what sort of balance they wanted it to be. So they are stuck with that recruitment for this year. As soon as we got into lockdown, then Andy Last was always going to be the option. Now, whether he's the long-term option, time will tell. I suspect, regardless of the result this week, which was incredibly disappointing, he probably isn't the guy they're looking for. I think they will want to go for a big name. So they've got some big personalities in that dressing room, and you have to manage them. There was a lot of talk, as there always is after a disappointing result, about, should Andy Last have left when Lee Radford went, because you don't really change what you're trying to achieve if some of the people are still behind the scenes that were party to that. I'm not sure about that. Sometimes you serve an apprenticeship, and Andy Last deserves a go, but I have a feeling that if Adam Pearson has ambitions and designs that we think he does, he'll want a name in there. He'll want a Craig Fitzgibbon type person who will put bums on seats, who will try and get the best out of the resource that he's got. But the problems that we identified right at the beginning of the year, how do you spell Danny Houghton? Who is your creative mainspring in a team where you've effectively got 3 of them? Unless you solve those problems, then it doesn't really matter who the coach is, to be honest.
On Hull, John, it's been a feature of them over the past few years that they can throw in a match where they will concede 50, 60, 70 points. I saw them do it at Bellevue a couple of years ago when we've actually hammered them. Great stat from James Smells in the Hull Daily Mail on Twitter. In 2020, Hull City, Hull FC and Hull KR, between them, have won 6 matches. And one of those matches was between Hull FC and Hull Kingston Rovers. Now, Hull City obviously can't play them. But it's not been a great year for the city of Hull. We'll come on to KR in a moment. But there's obviously something wrong at Hull FC that they do consistently. Teams lose by big scores. It happens. But it happens to them a little too often for a supposedly big club.
Yeah, I think anytime you concede 54 points, obviously it's first back from a long break, but you see that many points. And some of those tries were exceptionally soft. You have to ask real questions about the group, and by Warrington last year, there's been a lot of big scores. So there's something that needs to be fixed in that squad. And I thought it was the sacking of Lee Radford was a little harsh, and the players need to take some more responsibility for what's happening on the field.
I wonder if Stuart Pike got a message from Super League telling him off for saying Lee Radford, or saying that Andy Last might get sacked on the telly after the game, as everyone got told off for saying Lee Radford was sacked on the telly, which of course he wasn't, for all the people who will now complain that I've repeated that lie again. Fake news, that's what we are here on 4020 Live.
I think the other thing to bear in mind is that from the limited amount we've seen so far of these new rules, the word that is absolutely hated by our good friend Rod Studd is momentum. But there are some teams who are managing a weight of possession much better than others. And that if things do start going away from you, it's really, really difficult to stop it. So once Salford got on a roll, wanted the ball in their hands, were fast out of dummy half, and Hull were caught probably being too ponderous around that area, you get your 6 again, you get penalty awarded against you, you don't get any respite, you don't make a mistake with the ball in your hand, you score points. And 4 of the 5 games again this week were, wide margin scores, some more than others, clearly. But in all of those games, there was a period where the team that got heavily beaten had some ball, but very little of it compared to their opposition. And I'm sure that is something, as squads get weaker through injuries, as they play more often, we need to get used to this year, the likelihood of how that whole game finished more than how the Wigan Wakefield game finished.
Another one of those matches was on Saturday. First game of the weekend, you've had Castleford Tigers versus Catalan Dragons. All the headlines made this time on the field by Israel Folau, who was the man of the match and a superb performance from the former Australian centre in that 14-40 victory for Catalans. Interesting, amusing that people saying, "Oh, if only he'd have been in Rugby League longer." Yeah, but he's only in Rugby League because he didn't behave on Instagram. That's why he's in Rugby League.
Well,
yeah, that's the same as Joel Monaghan and all these people.
He actually left Rugby League to go to AFL for about $1 billion. So
that's another good reason. I'd do that for $1 billion. I don't know anything about AFL, but I'll turn up. Just a lot of people, just a lot of Australians.
It involves a lot of running and jumping, Rich. So
yeah, so I'd be no good at that.
You might struggle.
Well, it's a long time since I played basketball. In fairness,
I've seen that clip, Richard. I've seen that clip.
Well, that's why I talk about sport and don't do it. I know some of my limitations, not all of them. But back to the Catalans and Castleford. Well, Castleford go 14-0 up, John, and I thought, oh well, here we go, another big win for the Tigers. With predictions in, it's all good, and capitulated, fell apart.
Yeah, they did. I think, as Phil said, momentum is massive under these new rules, and when Matautia spear tackled someone to the ground and got sin-binned, and then they just continue to make error after error, give away penalties, the match completely, they lost grip of it completely. And I don't think anyone saw, 40-odd points, come from Catalans continuously. And Cass just fell apart. So it goes to show how much, individual decisions, individual errors can impact the game. And obviously Catalans, after the week before, really needed a good performance, and that sort of final 55, 60 minutes, whatever it was pretty special.
Too much ban for Matautia for that one, Danika. Do you think he was lucky to stay on the field or come back on the field right after 10 minutes?
Well, I always found it a really funny thing because I don't know, maybe I'm what's the right word to say? The decision was made, and that is it ever intentional? It's never intentional, as the best way you want to put it, and it's just unfortunate. So, it's very difficult to say, and I'd hate to think that anything's intentional. So, he's paid his dues, and he's going to have to continue to now, and that they lost out for that time being and stuff. So, I don't like to say whether it should have been more or less or whatever, but it cost them, didn't it? They suffered from it, and now they're gonna again, because he's going to have this time off in such a short league that they've got now in such a difficult time. So it is what it is, and he's going to have to pay the consequences regardless now. Well, that's a bit of a fluffy answer, but that's genuinely how I feel.
Well, I mean, I've been throwing red cards all over the place if I was on the field. So, it's important to hear from a player. What did you make of it?
In real time, I thought probably referee got it about right. The more you slow something like that down, the worse it looks. I just thought Catalan really benefited from playing the week before, and their performance the week before was almost identical to Castleford's this week. And they changed their hooker as well, and nothing at all against Michael McAlorum, who's been absolutely one of the best that we've seen in that position in the modern era. But there was more dynamism around Ben Garcia, and I just think the way they played was on the basis of the fact that we've learnt a little bit from last week. We now know how to manage a game better. I think that's the difficult thing, that you can do all the training that you like, but until you have contact. And what was the stat that came out of week one? The ball was in play 13 minutes more than normal. I mean, that's massive. You cannot prepare for that, particularly when you've been on lockdown and training yourself, no matter how hard you've been doing it, for 5 months. How St Helens have turned themselves around is an absolute astonishment that we'll talk about, because they've done what no other set of players have been able to do, and they actually seem to have come back from a layoff far more athletic than they went into it. Now, I think part of that, and obviously we'll get onto it when we talk about them, is the fact that they still had the World Club Challenge in their system when when we stopped the season. So rest has benefited them. But looking at the way the Dragons played this week, the whole way they approached the game was different. And I go back to exactly what Danika said. The protocols are fantastic, but they're incredibly different. You know, you run out to do your warm-up, normally there'd be a huge wave of noise behind you. There's nothing at the moment. You go into the ground, you expect the dressing room to be laid out a certain way or the entrance to be in a certain way. It's completely different. You get told what you need to do at half time, and whereas in the past you might have been able to go into certain areas, now it's relatively restricted. All your game day routine is completely upset at the moment. But when you've done that once, there's a chance that you're going to be better merely by having done it once. And I just got the impression that Darryl Powell wasn't as bothered as he would have been if you'd have given him that result in a normal season. It was, we know we can be better than this, because I think his players, again, got caught up, as a couple of other sides did. Even Chris Chester, who but for a wayward conversion his team would have won, was saying his players were getting too caught up in the new rules. What they needed to do was go back to the basics that they know so well and master that, and then worry about the new rules. And I think that it's the same for Cass, but not for Catalan this week.
Mentioned him, John, and he was the star performer. Israel Folau. Don't he? He's all the cliches. He lets his rugby do the talking and whatever. But he did this week, and there's no denying he's a very good rugby league player.
Yeah, he's been a very good rugby player of either code for 12 years, 13 years. Michael Shenton just had an absolute bath against him. Every time we looked up, Folau was beating him with pace or with a little step or speed, strength. He basically tore him apart. And he's got that ability. Obviously, he's not played rugby league, 7 years or something? So it was going to take him a while to get back to his best. And if you can keep playing like that every week, then you've got to put Catalan sort of in that top four semi-final calculation.
I'm good to see Tom Davis get a couple of tries as well. Another young player who's had injury problems in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he finished his try well. And I think if he's playing outside Folau every week, then he's going to score a lot of tries.
I guess you would say then, Danika, judging by your theory earlier on the weather, the longer it stays as a heat wave, the better it will be for the Catalan Dragons as they continue to play over here.
Well, let's be fair. It's not going to stay for long, is it? This is the good old British weather. We'll have 4 or 5 days, and then it'll be freezing cold next week. So we'll have to see how they go next week. But no, I do think it's a massive thing. It's like when when we go out, when I've been out for a test match, you train for the first couple of days and you absolutely die a death because it's so much hotter. And then when it comes to the game day, you're used to it. And I guess that's what they're doing. They acclimatise. Yesterday or Saturday wouldn't have been much for them really, because it's so much hotter in the south of France at the minute. It's hitting 40 degrees at some parts. So you kind of think, did it make a difference to them? Yeah, being in a stadium for some reason accentuates the heat, but they've been to the process, like Phil said. They've had their match day. The travel alone must be difficult, but they've done that. They understand what the system's like at Leeds and Headingley and how that works. And they've been through that process the whole time. So, there was a lot of argument between who would benefit, Catalan because they've played or Cas because they're fresh. And I think regardless of the new rules, and which obviously come into play hugely, but it is that new process, which I don't know if anybody really, if you don't play rugby, if you realise how much of a difference that makes to you. So I think they did have one opinion. Like you say, Novans have had a bit of a game, and we've essentially hit that round one for everybody. I think the next couple of weeks will bring up something else as well. So another few shocks in the system. So it'll be interesting to see how they do go forward next week, especially with how well Salford are playing.
I think the other thing when you talk about the weather, it's more the track. I think there are some teams that are absolutely ideally suited to a firm, fast pitch.
Yeah. And
clearly St Helens are the best example of that. They are absolutely revelling in Headingley's been like a snooker table these last 2 weeks. It didn't look so crash hot at the beginning of the season in all the wet, but it is absolutely the perfect surface to play on if you want to play running rugby. I think the other thing, you mentioned their flights, and that's massive. They're not used to chartering a plane on the day of the match, flying in, coach journey, where they're all shielded straight into the ground. The first time you do that, that's unfamiliar to you. That will affect the way you start a game. The second time you do it, it's becoming to become a bit more of a known factor. And I would expect, again, that the travel element for Catalan will get less of an issue over this August period when they're away in all of their games than actually it is during a regular season where you're at home for a week, or 2 weeks, you then get on a plane and fly over here and you spend a couple of days over here. And I think, the in and out hit at the moment will start to suit them. And I think it showed that this weekend.
The influx of refugees from Toronto continues, John, and one's landed at Castleford. That is Gareth O'Brien, and he's bound to be an upgrade on the options they had going into that game on Sunday. Or Saturday, even.
I'm staggered that Greg Eden won't be there at fullback next week, Rich. Staggered.
There you go. Succinct comment. That's what we like. That was Castleford. Also, Castleford and Catalans. Also on Saturday, Hull Kingston Rovers, the masters of the short kickoff, the entertainers, if you will. There's no relegation. We'll just go out and do whatever we want. Brilliant. They lost 40 points to 10 to Warrington, who will be without Anthony Gelling for the next 2 weeks. He also got a 2-match penalty notice for a grade C dangerous left on left, of course. He has appealed that. I don't know if he can or whatever. But Warrington won, as we expected, although, I tipped Hull KR last week, so I don't know what I was doing. But Danika, it's the result we expect, most people would have expected coming into that one.
Well, yeah, you look at that on paper, don't you? And you just look, current times kind of affected everything, but financially on paper, player for player, on the money that's been spent there anyway, you're expecting a big show from Warrington, and they had some class players, and it was good to see them have pretty much a full strength squad. But that first half, I think Hull really made some kind of, an effort, and they didn't look too out of it. I think Adam Quinlan in the back is absolutely brilliant. He was unfortunate, a couple of times with spilling the ball and stuff like that. But, there's a few real individual key players at Hull. And I think they really kind of not held their own, because, there are parts where you want them to score more. You expect more. They're in the Super League at the end of the day. But we all knew who was going to win that game, as much as I was willing as Hull to win. But I don't, that first half, and maybe was it a fitness thing? Have they worked as hard? I think they were one of the last Super League teams to go back to training, with various contract issues and stuff like that. So it was only a short turnaround anyway, but they've had less time together. But again, they now know the routine and stuff like that. And with Warrington, they just, like I said, they've just got some class now. Whether you like Anthony Gelling or not, he's a bit of he's an entertainer, I'd say, when he plays. He throws around some ludicrous balls that shouldn't ever land in anybody else's hands, that shouldn't ever come off. And the few times, on Saturday they didn't, but, when they do come off, he looks spectacular. We don't seem to be back in form, because I don't think he was that great at the start of the season. And he's now looking strong. So, yeah, it was what was expected. And, I was hoping Hull KR could have pulled it through, but I was just being probably very optimistic.
I was going to say, I think there's a chance that Hull KR could become everybody's second favourite team.
Yeah.
It's absolutely clear that, Tony Smith throughout his coaching career has loved the unpredictable. He's encouraged his team to express themselves. The trouble is, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword as well. And to be successful with that method, you cannot make mistakes, certainly not as many mistakes as Hull KR ultimately made, and particularly under these new rules where fatigue becomes much more of a factor. So I just think that had they held on to the ball for a little longer and more often, then Warrington might have struggled a little bit, because they, yes, Stephen Ratchford was great, but there is still a distinct lack of creativity within that Warrington team. There seems to be some, again, almost an over-duplication of resource as to who is going to run that team. Widdop doesn't look happy with a number 7 on his back. In the same way that, you know, Blake Austin looks inhibited by having Gareth Widdop inside him. Matty Ashton, who for a short time at the beginning of the season was quite rightly being labelled as one of the most exciting young talents, he couldn't even get a start. There almost is, what is our best selection to be the most productive? Up front, Darrell Clark clearly is going to benefit from having played a game. He is the kind of hooker that every club would want at the moment. But he didn't have his best game on Saturday, and he was honest enough to admit afterwards that they did what they had to do, but both the team and him in particular needed to be better, and they will be better. But I'm just not sure how far they can go, because I don't think they create enough chances. The problem for Hull KR is the exact reverse. At some point, you've got to rein yourself in a little bit.
Do you think Gareth Widdop will be wearing primrose and blue next year, Phil? Jonathan?
It's a good question.
He's got to me.
There's obviously some talk, a fair bit of talk about him going back to the Dragons, and I think whether his family may have gone back to Australia. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but yeah, there's obviously got to be huge doubt. You generally don't get a major paper running a story like that unless there's something in the works, and I don't think Widdop's not really set Super League alight, has he? So obviously, if there is a sort of a family situation, he may want to go back to Australia, which would change a lot for the club. But they're basically denying it officially at this point.
I was trying to get Mark on the show today, but he's too busy printing up those Legion Crisis T-shirts because it's back.
I thought he was back on holiday again.
He's on holiday more than Judith Chalmers, one for our younger listeners. Like Phil's in a sad emoji. I don't know if you can see that. I'd be interested to see if that happens. Oh,
that looks like Anthony Seibold.
Oh, but Leeds were back, and now they're not back again because they lost 48-0 to St Helens. The first time that Leeds have been nilled at home in a league game since March of 1992, when the super mega race Wakefield Trinity beat them 17-0.
Do you remember that vividly?
No, someone reminded me this morning. I can't remember.
You're not holding on to it at all, though, are you there?
No, I hold on to the 17-16 win the week after we won the Yorkshire Cup final with a last-minute drop goal from Nigel Wright. That's the one I hold on to because I was ball playing. I was there, and Nigel Wright was there, and the drop goal went over from I think pretty much his own goal line. It was that good. But St Helens, they are back 2 wins from 2 since the restart, Phil. And I think I said last week that the time off may have done them some good to get Christian Wilson methods up.
I think the first thing to say is they're a joy to watch. Doesn't matter who you support. When you can see Regan Grace doing what he did yesterday, get out of your seat, stand up and applaud. That was exceptional. Alex Walmsley is playing as well, I would say, as any prop in World Rugby League at the moment. And, he'd walk into that Penrith Panthers team that's ripping the NRL apart. He is absolutely sensational. The leadership of James Graham has taken them to another level. Lachlan Coote's organisation, there is not a weak link. I think the other thing that, apart from the fact that these conditions suit them, these rules suit them, they were able to virtually pick the same team as the week before. They decided to rest Mark Percival because he's coming back after a year out and had a slight tightness around the hamstring. But virtually that was man for man, exactly the same team as the week before. That is going to have a massive bearing on the remainder of this season. There are going to be very few teams that are going to be able to pick the same 17 week in, week out. And most of the press conferences this weekend were which players were in doubt for next week already. And that is no excuse for how far behind them their opposition were. But clearly, to beat the current St Helens team and the way they're playing, you need all your best players out there, and you need all your best players playing at the height of their ability. So Leeds were, by Richard Agar's admission, extremely poor. But if there is a mitigating circumstance, then it's they had about 6 of their first choice players out, and when Saints are in that mood, they would have done that to absolutely anybody. And they were fantastic. They were brilliant. And I'd rather focus on how good the speed at their transition from attack to defence and back again was as good as we've seen in this competition, probably since them last year. Actually, no, for a long time. It was even better than they were last year. And Leeds could not live with it. And whilst I'm not making any excuses for Leeds, no team would have lived with that yesterday.
Big asterisk.
Priceless.
I said Regan Grace earlier, Danika. I meant obviously Alex Walmsley.
Yeah.
So excited was I've ripped my headphones out. Alex Walmsley and James Graham with a try apiece, but Alex Walmsley's run until he got a bit tired. That was quite impressive. It shows you the endeavour of this St Helens side.
Well, that's it. Like both Walmsley and James Graham are units of men anyway, aren't they? But the speed and would I go as far as say agility? I'm not sure, but they are specimens of props. You know, they're the type of prop that you want on your team, and they draw in the defence. They create absolute havoc. You know, they can get a quick play of the ball. They can move. They can boulder over everybody. They are, you know, if you were to pick, you know, a starting England team, they'd be in your starting, you know, up there with your starting props anyway. So the fact that Saints have got them together and playing together regularly and playing well, you know, even when it comes to the new rules and stuff, and I think James Graham mentioned last week that his transition, because he never played the 6-again rule in the NRL, it kind of created the speed that maybe the Super League doesn't have to the NRL, but it created, you know, that speed that he's already used to anyway. Walmsley is just, you know, I think when he came back from his injury, he was kind of, it took him a while to get into his stride, and now that he's back, he's confident. You know, any injury knocks a player back, and you have to rebuild everything. But he's on fire, isn't he? And he looks like he can last a lot longer than 20 minutes, which you want a prop to do 15, 20 minutes, full out, put everything on the pitch. But he's doing full out, everything on the pitch for probably a good 25 at least, which is keeping that consistency, keeping the momentum of the flow of the game. And he just turns up and offers. He's there all the time. He's brilliant. I aspire to be like him.
I as we know, I'm sick of redemption stories in the bad sense, John. But in terms of Walmsley, he come back from a broken neck. This is something we should be saying. How the hell do you come back from that and come back and play as well as he is doing now? As Danika said, he's had to not relearn, but take a bit of time to get back to his best. But he's back there again now.
Yeah, that's right. It was a very, very serious injury. I mean, I think he got more damage and he might not be walking again, let alone playing rugby league and playing as well as he is. So it looks like during the lockdown he's been training the house down because he looks in the best, you know, form of his career. Obviously, there's a bit of speculation about him going to the NRL, but I don't think that will happen. I think he's not back a move before. And obviously, if St Helens can keep him, you know, he is a fantastic player, and you know he's just a man mountain. I mean, there's players that you see who can just go through teams one-handed, you know, and he just runs over people through them. And also, he's got great hands for a big man, as you saw. You know, he's got the smarts and the vision to sort of look up and see what support's there and find the other man, you know, in support. So, you know, he's probably loving playing alongside James Graham as well, who, you know, is a St Helens legend and probably someone he's looked up to in his younger years.
It's going to see now a good version of good hands. We'll get on the team. I don't know if we can do it. Good hands.
I think there are two other things about St Helens. One is the athleticism of their bench. I think the mix of forwards that they can bring on are very, very mobile, and so again that makes them relentless. But the other guy who perhaps didn't get as much credit as he should have done because the bloke on the other wing was doing all the stuff that you want to report on, Tommy Makinson is in just outstanding form at the moment. He's taking so much pressure off the forwards. He's making approximately 200 metres a game with not only the speed with which he runs out of defence, but the brilliant angles that he picks, the spaces that he runs into. He's dragging defences back, you know, 10, 15, 20 metres every time he gets the ball and runs at them. And in the days when Leeds had Tom Briscoe and Ryan Hall at their absolute peak, that used to terrorise defensives because it gave the Jamie Peacocks and the Kylie Lulais, they didn't need to get involved until tackle number 3 because the momentum had already been established, so they could save their energy. Well, making that, Johnson is the best finisher in the league. Makinson is the best all-round winger in the league at the moment. You put those two together for England, and that is a combination that we should be very excited about.
Phil, you've watched more rugby than the rest of us.
That's because I'm older, that's all.
That's what I mean.
Yes, I remember when Leeds were nilled at home in 1992, twice in 3 weeks, once by Wigan and once by Wakefield. And yes, Gary Schofield was in that squad.
How for the hat trick was Regan's Grace yesterday? Regan Grace, yes.
Thrilling, absolutely thrilling. And I think it might have been Phil Kinsella, maybe, who was commentating for Radio Merseyside, who said that's the nearest he's seen to Martin Afire when he started to make a name for himself. And I think it is, to get one 100-metre try comes along every 5 games. He did it twice in 10 minutes. It was just like phenomenal. And what I liked was it wasn't straight speed. That you can't buy. Josh Addo-Carr's got that and showed that when he intercepted for Melbourne this week. What Regan Grace had for his first try was wonderful balance. The ability to pick a course up the middle and put 2 people on their bottom through his ability to change pace at speed and change direction at speed. He was fantastic. That, again, I'm looking on behalf of the Welsh Rugby League who are building up to a World Cup. Let's talk about Regan Grace. Let's talk about him as one of the great finishers in the world. This is a guy you don't want to give half a yard to. Otherwise, no matter who you're playing, he'll demonstrate some of the best finishing skills. I think you said it as well. This week, we've got the 2 guys who should have been making all the headlines up against each other on opposite sides of and facing each other. If we can't make something marketing-wise out of Regan Grace against Tom Johnstone this weekend, we don't deserve to have a major sport.
And both of them are decent lads, so don't appear to have done anything bad. And I just think we pick the wrong targets sometimes. I just think we pick the wrong targets. But we'll talk more about the world's greatest ever try in a few moments. Is there anything more we can say about St Helens? Have we pretty much said it all there? I think, in fairness, Danika, and Phil mentioned it, and John's mentioned it, Leeds were without some key players. If you take Rob Louis out of the team, who has got a good partnership with Luke Gale at the moment, you are going to change things, and Richie Mile as well has been key. I don't want to make excuses for Leeds, but Saints are obviously the better team, but Leeds will get better when they have those players back in the coming weeks.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm not a half-back, nor do I ever profess to be, though sometimes I can pretend. That combination, it's taken Leeds a long time to find a combination that does work. And, Luke Gale is very much an organiser. Rob is very much a doer. And I think that's when you can accept that and you've got that combination, it's a great one. And whether you argue Rob was on form last week or not, you still miss him this week. And you still miss the confidence that he brings to the team. Connie and whatever else. And, James Donaldson's an absolute cracking off the bench. Really adds value. So, yeah, there were elements where there were people missing. But sure, I don't know. I'm not trying to defend them, but surely as a squad, whether you bring Alex Sutcliffe in or McClelland and stuff, surely they should be jumping in at training anyway. It's not 3 people do not make a squad. So are they therefore, do they need to run more times with options like that in training? Isn't that what training's for? It's like when we've lost players in the past, you have to make the best of a bad situation, but then do you make your team feel a bit rubbish because actually you say they've lost because of 1 or 2 or 3 players, or do you make them accountable for how poor they actually were? As much as it pains me to say, because I'll try and defend them until the cows come home, but it was Saints again. Yeah, I agree with Phil. Saints were phenomenal, and that can't be taken away. But there are times when you just shook your head and just thought, "What's going on?" So we shall see what the coming weeks bring and who comes back in and what the crack is.
Well, next up for Leeds is one of those great rivalries. They take on the Super League table toppers Wigan. who are top of the table thanks to a 1-point victory, 23 points to 22 over Wakefield yesterday. We'll talk about the before-match stuff in a bit and the after-match stuff. But first, the game itself. I'm surprised that the Super League website hasn't got pictures of Bill Tupper or Reece Lynn. I don't know where they must have got lost somewhere, but they played. 2 tries from Liam Kay for Wakefield on his re-debut. I thought the Wood brothers, we call them with their eyebrow raised, were very good, work hard. But Wigan, too much. Zach Hardacre again. I said last week on the programme, didn't have to slag him off on for his Twitter spat with Jamie Foster that he would come good, and he did. The good news for me is I backed him and Tom Johnstone both to score a try, so I came out in profit, so that's good. Even better backing Saints to win by more than 20. But Wigan come out with the points. They're the top of the table at the moment, John, and I guess at the end they'll be slightly relieved, but a good performance over the whole 80 minutes.
Yeah, it was a really entertaining game. Obviously, Wakefield came right back into it and were a little bit unlucky. Classy drop goal from Harry Smith. I think if you're Wakefield, you're kind of ruining some of the mistakes. There was some poor errors that obviously were costly, but they did show a lot of spirit to come back into it. So definitely take a lot from that performance, I think.
Harry Smith played some of the young players that Wigan.
I think the main thing is that, but for a goal kick that cannoned off a post, that was there for Wakefield to win, and that'll be the most encouraging feature for Chris Chester. I think that to almost again, like Huddersfield and Leeds the week before, be seemingly out of the game. One thing we've learned over these 2 weeks with the 2 close games that finished a point apart is you're never really sure when a game is over if it's close. You get to 10, 12 minutes from the end and you're still within 2 or 3 scores of the opposition, you might have a chance of winning. Because if you can hold on to the ball, if you can get back-to-back sets of 6, can elicit a penalty from the referee because you're in command of the ball, then if you've got talented players who are prepared to move the ball wide, you will trouble any defence. Wigan were okay. They were solid. I think that clearly they missed Tommy Luluai going off. They missed not having Sean Laughlin there because those are the key guys that you tend to organise your team around. I still don't think they've solved their half-back issues. I'm not sure Sam Powell is an auxiliary half-back. Harry Smith clearly is, but at the very beginning of his career. I liked Ethan Havard at the beginning. I think he's a young kid that, again, I really hope that he isn't, but could be the next one on the radar of the NRL. And we probably should mention at this time that, Dom Young signing for Newcastle Knights is a blow for the English Super League. I've only seen him a couple of times playing for the Yorkshire and England Academy. He is enormous. He is absolutely huge and athletic. He made one first team appearance, I think, for Huddersfield last year, and he is a talent. And we'd lost Harry Rushton, who hadn't even played a first team game for Wigan. I'd say Havard is the kind of bloke physically you look at and go, he could walk into an NRL setup at the moment. Wigan are going to persevere with the youngsters. I think George Burgess has got a 1-match ban today, so he isn't going to be playing next week. That obviously will be factored in. They've still got work to do. They clearly were a bit rusty, as were Wakefield. But there was enough encouragement for Chris Chester and his men to say, if we're the width of a post away from beating Wigan, it's just a shame maybe we've got St Helens this week.
No, we'll get it. It's no problem. What did you make of the game, Danika?
If I'm completely honest, I thought that first 20 minutes was the most difficult 20 minutes to watch.
What was going on? It was like a knock-on-a-thon.
It was like... It was kind of what you'd expect from 2 teams coming back from not playing for a good few months and not being professional. It was frustrating in the sense that there were silly silly errors left, right and centre, and it took such a long time for them to settle in all. That's what I think anyway. And it was kind of one of them things where if this is happening and it's not just once or twice, it was several times for both teams, why are we not just going back to really simple basics to clearly either settle themselves, settle into the game, just to get used to running next to each other again? I don't know what it was, but I thought, which therefore made it a bit of a struggle for me to continue watching until, again, second half picked up a little bit more. But Wakefield look great, and they've recruited well, and having Gigo there as well, I think is just. I think is this the right analogy? That it's a bit of a big fish in a small pond in the sense that his experience, at least he'll be able to kind of come into Wakefield and lay his own mark down with what he's done beforehand, and have the backing of the club and of Chris to play at his own flow. You've got likes of Fafita, who we've all had a good lockdown, but he still looked like he was powering through. And then they've recruited well. So Richard, I was backing Wakefield. I was backing them. I was hoping for good stuff after they'd spilled 55,000 balls, as well as Wigan did as well. But yeah, it was settled in. Once it settled in, it was a good game to watch. It was an exciting game to watch once you got over the initial riffraff.
Yeah, the riffraff. A word on Danny Kerman, 300 appearances, I think it is now, which is a ridiculous number for a player. He's had so many injuries over the year, but as close to a modern-day legend at Wakefield as you can get. I think Carl Wood hit the same number as well. Good to see Max Jowett getting a run in the team. Usually a fullback, but playing a halfback alongside Jacob Miller. Gigo, I guess, John, is pretty much a replacement in every sense, in terms of his ability and in terms of his attitude for Danny Brough.
Yeah, is he a trialist, Rich, or is he signed permanently?
He's signed an actual contract. He's getting paid actual money, as opposed to Toronto's players, yeah.
No, he's he's a good pickup for Wakefield, obviously, with Brough's injury, and he can cover a few positions. Definitely good enough to be in Super League. But I think the highlight of that game for me was Tom Johnstone. Just continues things that are, unbelievable and just downright freakish. It was certainly a weekend for wingers with Grace and Johnston. Just so nice to see them two do their thing.
Is he the best, Phil, do you think, at what he does?
Yeah, I think his record proves it. He, when you saw that in normal speed, you thought there is absolutely no way that you can get in that kind of contorted position and hold on to the ball and with a bad elbow and get the ball down. And when the joy of it being slowed down so you can appreciate it for all that it's worth. If we can't sell this sport to a wider audience on the back of the kind of exploits that we saw from Tom Johnstone, from the speed of Bevan French, from the joy of watching a Regan Grace, we're a handling and running sport, and they epitomise it. But the taking the corner flag out of the equation has arguably been the best new modern rule change that we brought into the sport. And I'd have to say over the last 2 or 3 years, no one does it better than Tom Johnstone in Super League. They've got 1 or 2 that are pretty good in the NRL as well, but Johnston's up there, and he'll be fantastic for Germany in International Rugby League.
You might have got a bit of this, right? Get him in there. Fly the German flag.
Dawn picks his team on form. Wayne Bennett obviously didn't always do that. He tended to play his favourites. So I think if Tom Johnston's in that form going ahead next year, he's definitely got to be in the World Cup squad, because he can do things that the likes of Ryan Hall and Jermaine McGilvery can't.
So after 50 minutes of talking about rugby, let's talk about non-rugby things. I'm going to replace myself with the test card here, but I just want to go back to last week's programme and last week on Twitter. And after Israel Folau didn't take the knee, I mentioned that communication was important. I said that if Catalans had said beforehand what was going to happen, it wouldn't have changed anything, because everyone would still have made a big song and dance about it. I said to Phil this morning, if I was at Wakefield, which obviously people know I do some work at the club, but I'm not at the moment, I'm on furlough, I would have advised that they put out a statement knowing what was going to happen, and they did put out that statement. I'll put it on screen for you now, and then the key points are: everyone at Wakefield Trinity fully supports all measures and messages devoted to improving equality, diversity and inclusion, and we will confront racism not only in rugby league but in society. The club will not tolerate any racism within its ranks, and the board, players and staff are totally united on that. Obviously, the Wakefield players all stood together, linking arms. Reece Lynn, one of those players, was on Twitter this morning and said, just to clear things up from yesterday, I'm reading some crazy comments and people seemingly jumping on board, thinking we weren't showing support to Black Lives Matter. As a group, we decided to show unity against racism in our own way. Every person has a choice which should be respected. He goes on to say, if you're zooming in on our BAME players' faces saying we're not happy, then you're wrong. We wanted to show unity and solidarity as a team against racism, which as a club we are. Before I let you speak about this, I do wonder perhaps in the way that football and cricket don't have as many players or any players from the likes of Tonga and Samoa who are deeply religious and have deeply held views on who you should kneel before and whatever. I do wonder if we should have realised this before, and we've had plenty of time to think about this, but we didn't. Everything is, in hindsight, is 2020, isn't it? But I'll let you speak about this and I'll sit in the background and mute myself.
Oh, it's it's a tough one for me because obviously I really appreciate the effort that the Super League are doing to kind of show their support and to try and promote the fact that they're, this is a sport that without racism and things like that. And we're not going to please everybody, and that's the key thing. And everybody is completely and utterly entitled to do what they want and behave how they want to behave in terms of showing their respect or showing their unity or showing their support. There's a part of me that thinks, yeah, communication is absolutely key, but there's also a part of me that thinks, where's the level of these people are now on TV? They are idolized by hundreds and thousands of young people, adults, children, whatever else. And where's the fine line between doing what you personally want to do in support of whatever your belief is versus doing what is right for people that potentially, and it's a bit of a strong word to use, but idolize you and therefore will, do as their team or their player they support the most is doing. And I think that's a really tough one. And the whole thing with the Folau, he can do what he likes, but given his track record, where's the line that he needs to show that he's not remorseful. I don't know if that's the right word because he believes what he believes. But is there a line where the Super League should say, we need to make a decision in how this runs because we have fans, and that's what they are, watching you and what you do in response to this whole movement. And that's the only thing I question, and I'm not debating anybody's belief or how they choose to support or whatever it is. I just think, should there be a greater stance in a sense that, you have got people watching and seeing what you do. I don't know. Who am I to tell them what they should and shouldn't do?
I'm going to let John go next.
No, it's you, Bill.
Thought long and hard about this, particularly on the back of last week's programme, which clearly garnered a lot of reaction. And one of the things that we shouldn't be frightened of is debate. But in my opinion, in this instance, there shouldn't be any debate. There's a right way to do things and to make a point, and there's a wrong way to do things. What Wakefield did was the law of unintended but entirely predictable consequence. If sport as taking it upon itself, or the rest of the world is showing as a gesture of significance to kneel, then to do anything other than to kneel is going to bring in a level of criticism and attract people, as we've seen on social media, who don't agree with that. I think with the greatest respect to people who we have a lot of time for, Michael Carter and Danny Kermond and whoever else was involved in making the decision, I think it was a really naive misjudgment. I think if you don't kneel for something, then you stand for nothing. I think the statement that Chris Chester made about we wanted more education about the issue, I don't buy into that. We saw a fantastic video from 3 Huddersfield players, most of whom will have played with or against everybody in that Wakefield squad, who told you exactly why the Black Lives Matter movement was important and why as a sport we should get behind it, and why if we do represent anything or have certain values, that's what they are. I also saw a documentary last night which has left a major impact. I would implore anybody who has any misunderstanding about the racist issue and why sport is so important and why the reaction that you take is vital, to watch The Australian Dream. It's on the BBC iPlayer for the next month. It's the story of Adam Goods. The sport happens to be AFL. Doesn't matter that it's not rugby league. The issue happens to be about the indigenous population in Australia. It doesn't matter that it's not the black population in Brixton in London or wherever. That will tell you that if you don't stand up for something, if you allow people in the crowd to take a view that is antithetical to you as a sport and what you stand for, you are doing yourself and your sport an injustice. And to do nothing is to condone the action. And it took him 4 years, but Goods got an apology from the sport for not doing enough when he stood up to racism. And I'm sorry, but what Wakefield did on Sunday, for whatever reason, gave the impression to people that wanted to take that impression that they didn't support what the game stands for.
I'm nodding. No, I echo what Phil said, and I'd just say it's a bit sad and probably not surprising that the whole kind of debate, discussion, the whole issue's been very warped and hijacked, as if it's some sort of political campaign when, I don't understand how racism is political. You're either against racism or you're not, against black people being killed in acts of police brutality. I think you can kneel in support of that and not be for a communist agenda or whatever some people are claiming. I think we should just try and be more tolerant. And I think in some of the furor that's been about players kneeling or not kneeling, probably would have dissipated or been minimised by communication. If Israel Folau had put out a comment saying he wasn't kneeling because of religious reasons, but he supports anti-racism, action, which apparently he does. Two people who know him well told me that in the past week. Then I think that probably would have, there wouldn't have been much debate about it. But it is what it is, and it is sad that this kind of thing's been hijacked by people for their own means. But you can't. The notion that you can take politics out of sport is pretty stupid. I think you could ask Colin Kaepernick or Muhammad Ali or Jesse Owens or Adam Goods, as Phil mentioned, or however many famous, Tommy Smith from the 1968 Olympics, etc. It's a part of society, it's a part of life, and you can't put your head in the sand and ignore it.
Tommy Smith, who ended up, of course, running in a race at Bellevue to make money after he was shunned by the American athletics authorities and so on and so forth.
That's great for the most random fact of the day, Rich. Yeah. Very nice.
It's true. Selling autographs for 10p a time. Somewhere. Probably worth more than some players today. What happens next? Because we saw with the Premier League football, there was the players took a knee before every single game until the end of the season. Our season obviously goes on a bit longer. What do we do next? Because obviously the issue is going to one day not be someone's taking a knee and someone's standing or someone's doing this or that or the other. We actually have to stop the gestures and actually do something, because we can say we're this inclusive sport as much as we want, But as we've seen on social media from so-called fans, and I can say so-called fans, but Phil will say, well, they are fans because they go to games or whatever. They buy merchandise. They're racist. They follow our game. They're as much rugby league fans as you or I. And by ex-players, coaches who make obviously racist statements on social media, and I've seen another one today, and people have, commented or whatever. What do we do next? Oh, we haven't got the answers, have we? That's the problem, and I don't think anyone does have the answers. But we have to do.
You see, that's where I think Wakefield have been naive, because if they thought that by making that gesture on their own, outside of what is the accepted norm to register your opposition to racism, what can you do? If Wakefield now all take a knee next week, people will call them snowflakes. If they still follow the process of standing up, then people will say they're promoting racism. We backed ourselves into a corner. That's why I say it's a naive misjudgment, because you could predict that this was going to happen. And I genuinely don't know where we go from here. I would be really interested to know what the broadcaster thinks of it, because of all the people that have taken on the Black Lives Matter logo, movement, statement. Every game has a huge banner there. They're changing the makeup of their panels on sport to at least reflect the fact that society perhaps is slightly different now to what it was before they'd even thought about things like that. They are in the vanguard of what the Black Lives Matter movement means in terms of its profile. If one of the sports that is so supposedly important to Sky are not prepared to do that, and it looked really, really odd yesterday that in the background to the Wakefield players all standing up was the big Black Lives Matter banner behind them, then I wonder what Sky think of all this. I mentioned it last week and I stand by it. I don't think this is personal choice. I think that, this is right or wrong. Clearly, racism and kneeling on somebody's neck, which is why this kneeling gesture is what it is not up for debate for me. For those people that don't want to support it, that don't want to change it, whatever they think, they will be perceived as supporting racism. Now, we either have to, as a sport, be brave enough to get together and tell everybody that your choice is you either play or you don't play. If you play, you take the knee. If you don't want to take the knee, you don't play. Whether it needs to be as hardline as that, maybe it does. But we are in a really difficult position at the moment as a sport. We call ourselves all-inclusive. Too many have demonstrated over the last 2 weeks that is just words, it's not actions.
Do you not go into? It's like the whole, the Thursday night clapping for NHS. Every Thursday we'd step out and we'd clap for the NHS and how great they were doing, and all of a sudden it just stopped, and that was that. It didn't mean that we necessarily forgot about them, but we therefore weren't as appreciative. Maybe programs are on later. There was news coverage, the whole pots and pans, people singing, and all of a sudden that just stopped. And it feels like you've just gone back to square one again, in the sense that obviously then the government pulled out loads of ridiculous things. So is there a fear that if you do stop it, people are just going to think, do we go back to square one? Can we build momentum into the sense that it becomes not necessarily a regular gesture, but we keep on coming back to this whole, you keep dipping in, reminding people that this sport is all about the Black Lives Matters movement, and I think that's the thing you need to think about, because it's like the Premiership. They all had Black Lives Matters instead of their names on the back of their shirts, and then 2 weeks, two or three games into the Premiership, they all had their names back on, and it was kind of like it just happened. There was no discussion about it. It just happened. Whereas this is such a big thing with taking the knee, like you said, the season's much longer. It's taken an extra few minutes out of the viewing time, which I think is absolutely brilliant. I'm not disputing that, but what I'm saying is it's such a big part of it. If you think 2 minutes of them walking over, getting down, standing back up again, that time on live television is a very big chunk of time to fill or to add onto your program. So, how do you seamlessly keep that going, but without, making it, I think it needs to become something. It needs to become routine. It needs to become part of the sport, because by keeping it a highlighted element, we're going to constantly have these negative kind of connotations of these people that are disagreeing with it, and that's just going to continually keep the negativity around it. Make it part of the sport. Make it part of game day. Make it part of the shirts. Maybe do you have a patch on a shirt, whatever. Continue to show your support, but we need to kind of make it so it becomes part of the sport and people aren't thinking it's a gimmick or an add-on. And that's where I think the next step is. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what it is. I don't know how you do it. And then these fans that are disagreeing with it, well, you either support Rugby League and the Black Lives Matter because it comes as one, or you don't, and you go find yourself a new sport. But that's quite a bold statement to make, but I've made it.
That's what we're all about. I mean, John, I look at all these things we do in Rugby League. Whether it's, do we ever do rainbow laces? Well, that's just the thing we pretended to and didn't really do. All the clubs that were going to do those Pride days when Izzy came to their ground, but never got around to doing it because they couldn't because of the coronavirus. State of mind round. Respect the referee round. Respect the referee and then go on Twitter during a game, as one player did yesterday, and question decisions. Brilliant look for the sport, that is. It's a 1 week wonder, and then we just move on to the next cause célèbre, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's modern society, isn't it? I think the important thing is, and I think Sky, I've got to compliment Sky in the last 2 weeks. They had Martin Fire on, and obviously had that, as Phil mentioned, that really moving bit with Ashton Golan and Michael Lawrence and Jordan Turner, and then they had Leon Price on. I think we really need to listen to the people in the game who have experienced racism and combated it, because it's a lot different for say the four of us, four white individuals who haven't really experienced it on that same level, don't face it day to day. Like I think Jordan Turner mentioned, getting pulled over by the police just because he's a black guy driving a car. You can't really, unless you've walked in those shoes, you can't really understand it. So I think it's been important that we hear the perspective of these people. I think we need to keep the conversation going, and ultimately it's about education. It's about young people, and maybe something in junior rugby league, in clubs. There's courses that the RFL can lead, or teaching the coaches that they can pass their young players, and try and stamp it out as much as we can. Because while the sport is far from perfect, I don't think anyone would say it has got a great history of being very inclusive. To Roy Francis and Clive Sullivan and Artie Beats and et cetera, Ellery Hanley. So I think we should be proud of that, but we can obviously do better, and should continue to strive to do better, and not let, I guess, the momentum of what's happened in the US and here and around the world in the last few months dissipate.
And purely from a Wakefield point of view, they've spent all day today trying to justify their actions. Not once have they been able to promote Tom Johnston's try. Now, we're not comparing light with light there. One is a game-related marketing tool. The other is a philosophy, which as a sport we supposedly hold dear. But what I would say is they've shot themselves in the foot on the ability to market themselves today, because unfortunately the reaction, which was entirely predictable, has taken that away from them.
There are too many podcasts and TV and radio programs involving rugby league who have people involved who don't discuss issues of which there is a massive conflict of interest, and I hope that people realise that this program is not one of them. Toronto.
Can I just say I blame Richard Shaw Wright for the whole Wakefield thing, and if he's not sacked, immediately I'll be starting a campaign for his sacking, calling for his sacking.
You got Michael Carter's number? You're going to send him a message?
I have got his. I'll send him a message right now. Here we go.
Give me the sack. I've just seen a tweet from Joe Mellor, one of a few, it seems, Toronto players who have taken to social media at the time of recording this programme, which is a black box with white writing. It says, 3rd month of no play for the players, staff and families of at Toronto Wolfpack official, at Rugby Football League, #forgotten, #mental health. John's just written a long thing about Toronto. We'll let him get me the sack, and we'll come to him in a moment. I've seen fans, Phil, and this again goes back to the idiocy of people, question the fact that Arsenal are trying to help out people who have not been paid through no fault of their own, saying this is a bad thing. This is an utter.
It is. It's a situation where there are no winners. You know, David Argyle is heavily out of pocket. He's not going to get his money back. The players are not being paid. It's great that Gareth O'Brien's been picked up. There'll be one or two others maybe who'll at least finish the 2020 season with another club for which their efforts will be paid. But the bulk of them, and John knows better than anybody, some of them who have now retired are not being paid. And clearly that's a remnant of the Celtic Crusaders. As a sport, what have we learned? You know, I know money is absolutely in the tightest supply for everybody at the moment. But as a sport, we have to look after the players. There needs to be some kind of a levy or a fund or a reserve whereby if players through no fault of their own are not being paid because of mismanagement of the club, and if I was a player, I would be questioning why you could only be a part member of a competition that you're part of, which means you're denied funding. Clearly, I haven't mentioned it yet, and there are some people here who write for said organ. The new Forty20 is out on Friday, and there is a big interview with Brian Noble about the demise of Toronto. You know, he has been in there now. Whether he ends up being part of the reasons for the problems that they're in at the moment, people will have to decide when they read it. But, you know, it's clear the amount of lobbying that has gone on behind the scenes to try and alert people to what was happening as a humanitarian story. And the fact that even at the end of all this, there was a plea to the Super League clubs for a loan of money to get Toronto through the end of this season, which would have seen those players paid, that was turned down, is completely wrong. So yes, nobody more eloquently than John has written about the role of Toronto in all of this, but the game is culpable. And our policy or lack of it on expansion is woeful. It's the same issues, one location after another. There's the ridiculous irony at the moment that as Toronto's players are going on social media saying they haven't been paid, Ottawa are recruiting players. Until we sort out exactly who we are, what we want, how we're going to make the necessary provision for expansion clubs to be successful, if that's what we want, rather than bring them in and penalise them, and to use Brian Noble's phrase, set them up to fail, then you know, we need to look at everything, and it's the desperately sad situation. And I have every sympathy for Joe Mellor. I hope he picks up a club soon. He's on his day. He's a fine halfback.
I'll let you tee off on this one, John, in a moment. But there's one thing that has always amused me by people in our line of work. You know, I've been lucky enough to get away with this career for a while now, although not currently at the moment. But who go to bat and cheerlead, and I know people don't like it when we use that word, for rich men who own rugby league clubs, because it does tend to be men and not women, because women are smart enough not to do it, who, because they've got lots of money, we need to bow and scrape at them because they may, you know, not every club has a Simon Moran who seemingly bankrolls a club and pays everyone on time and just gets on with it. There are plenty of these. I'm trying to think of, cowboys. That's probably not a libelous word, so am I right to use that one? Rich people who don't pay their bills on time, who are seen as messiahs by some because they might save the sport, because we see time and time again, do not. And unfortunately, David Argyle's the latest one in a line of these people. It's like when Michael Knighton flew into Man United to buy them in a helicopter and ended up owning Carlisle. It's just, I don't know where we go.
Sorry, was that to me?
Yeah, well, you can talk about it. You've written this long article. It's available.
Yeah.
Read it, and you've had lots of response today on social media. Lots and lots of response.
I feel it's pretty much all spelled out in that piece, and I've written other things, and I don't know how many tweets and how many podcasts, and obviously on this show, I think 2 weeks ago, I echo a lot of what Phil said, but I would kind of argue. Phil said he felt sorry for David Argyle. No one told him to spend 17 million, quid on rugby league. He's apparently a billionaire, so I don't think he's going to miss 17 million. I feel sorry for the players who are struggling to pay their bills and have to go and get other jobs, or the creditors who've owed money for 3 years. There's players who've been owed money for 3 years. This sort of stuff's been going on for a long time, and the fact is Toronto have treated some of the other clubs very poorly when it comes to paying money. So hence, when they ask for a favour from said clubs, what are you going to do? You're probably not going to help them because you've been shat all over for quite some time. So there's got to be some, I can't think of the word actually, but, if you act poorly, then there's got to be some reaction, some circumstance to that. So Phil is right. The history of expansion is littered with these examples like the Crusaders, PSG, etc., and we've not learned from those. And you could say that Toronto was set up to fail the fact that they didn't have an equal share of the Sky money, and that's definitely part of it. But there's so many mistakes made there from the recruitment of players, from the officials who were in charge, and as you said, Rich, one of the saddest things is people who are supposed to be in the media and balanced and impartial are clearly not, because some of the coverage has been, or some of the silence, I guess, on things that have been widely known and been on for a long time before COVID have been convenient, ignored, and continue to be convenient. So it is a very sad case. I hope the staff and the players at the club get paid what they owe, and I do feel sorry for the fans, not the ones who've been trolling me, but the decent ones, which there are quite a few, who are, are passionate supporters of Toronto and, have been to many games and follow rugby league in general. And, I've met some of them, I know, as you have, Rich, and they're good people. So it's, I hope they can find a new existence, but it needs to be done properly and it needs to be done with integrity because, as I said the other day, in rugby league, it just seems that anyone with money comes in, whether it be Andrew Chalmers or Marlon Kukash or whoever, who has a hint of some money, we just drop our pants and let them do what they want with us. And we need to actually have a bit of balls and a bit of integrity.
Yeah, at least Dr. Sir Alan Stanford's never trying to buy a rugby league team. So that's, one in our favour over the ECB. We didn't have Scully and Ellery Hanley stood next to a case full of millions of pounds in photocopied money or whatever. That involved helicopters as well. I guess Danika is a player, and I know you don't get paid in Women's Super League, but if you promise something and you don't get it delivered, it is going to give you problems.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, isn't it? Regardless of what it is you do, your job, you work hard and you expect payment. There's so many things about Toronto that there was something the other day that I heard that all of the money comes from interest from all the investments anyway, and there's been no interest because there's been everything closed down for COVID. Did Sonny Bill get 70% of his payout before he even played a game? And is he therefore hoarding money that he could have shared with his teammates? I mean, would you have done that? Would you not have done? It's just a really sad, for me as a player, obviously the players getting paid is going to cause so much hassle and trauma, mental health issues, family issues. All of the horrendous stuff aside, what we're actually doing is we're losing another bulk of fans, and like we've spoken about, the Toronto fans are incredible. There's a few of them that are, in the UK and are really diehard fans, but there's a huge bulk of people out in Toronto that enjoy going to the game. You see the footage of the game day in Toronto, and who doesn't want to be there? Who doesn't want to go, and be part of the atmosphere and the day? And it's an event in itself, isn't it? And we're losing out that whole having our sport being spread around the world. As cliche and as cheesy as you might think that sounds, that's, for me, is what's really sad. Obviously, after the sense that the players and the staff haven't been paid, but on the grand scheme, will they recover from this? Will we have Toronto back in 2021? It's not looking particularly likely, is it? So that's the sad part of the whole debacle that is. Would the RFL have helped out? Should they not? Whatever. But there you go. It's just sad for the sport.
125 years, Phil, and whether it's a million attempts in London, Coventry, first time, Blackpool in the 50s or whatever, Gateshead, we've never been able to expansion properly, have we?
I think the issue is twofold. One is when your sport is effectively governed by the people who are already in it, it becomes a closed shop by definition. And vested interest then becomes the reason behind whether a team come in and is successful or whether they don't. And where we've seen expansion in other sports, there's been positive discrimination. There's been a decision to open a new market, and for all of those people within the sport to want it to be successful, because the spin-off is that it looks bigger, it feels bigger, it attracts more investment, everybody therefore benefits. We've got the people who might be materially affected by a Toronto being successful saying, oh, I don't know if I want them to take my place. And then you never make the decision on the basis of what is best for the long-term future of the sport. And we have always been the butchers, the bakers, and the candlestick makers, the big fish in the small pool. And whilst we've said we've wanted to be a smaller fish in a bigger ocean, we never have, and we never will unless that changes. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that you look at any development, any new market that's been tried to be opened in any era, and the one thing it needs is time. And the one thing we've never given any potential new avenue of interest in our sport is time. It's like you've got your 5 minutes in the window. If you can't do it, move on to something else, somebody else, or retrench back to what we are. And speak to anybody about development in its widest sense. And again, I go back to speaking to Brian Noble about it. He was told on at least 2 occasions by senior officials, where are all the Canadian and American players in your team if you're going to be truly representative of Canada and North America? And he said, it's a perfectly valid question, but why don't you come back and ask me in 20 years' time? Because that's how long it takes. There is no infrastructure there at the moment. And if you seriously thought that the main...
Can I just Phil? The thing is that any development, you talk about it.
But the argument as well on that is development not also the joint responsibility of the sport?
It is, yeah.
And if it's going to be the joint responsibility of the sport, then how can you deny a team an access to membership of your organisation and funding that goes with it? So you want them to pay for all the players, you want them to get 10,000 fans, you want them to get the television deal, which they hadn't yet got round to getting. You also want them to have 100,000 people playing the sport within 3 years of setting up. It doesn't happen that way. You either have to invest something yourself as a sport, or you have to say to them, you've got that 20 years to do it. We did neither. We've never done either. We've used Melbourne as a classic example of something that is successful. Melbourne went down the top-down model. That's the model that Melbourne, Toronto wanted to follow. Get some kids who've got great potential, but have no particular link to the team that they're playing for. Get them, get the local audience excited, get little kids to then look up to these people and start playing the game. And 10, 15, 20 years down the line, those little kids start to be producing, superstars of their own. Mahe Fanua was the very first Melburnian to play for Melbourne Storm. Now, he came along, was it 12 years after Melbourne had first played a game? It takes that long.
I think the thing with Melbourne, they did the greatest, maybe the greatest player of all time, and two also three later and then Israel Folau and Greg Inglis. So that's to be able to get all that and then to be successful for 15 years and win grand final after grand final, that's it's almost impossible, really.
Why does everything go back to Folau? Interesting to note, breaking news, I don't know if it's breaking news or not, League Express have just tweeted that New York has pulled out of talks to buy Toronto. I can't believe it. I can still buy some merch. So
Negative.
I know, so negative. Before we get on to the predictions, Danika, you are our favourite representative of Women's Rugby League, because we only know about 2. Any ideas when you're going to be playing?
No.
As you asked me the other day.
I messaged you the other day and I was like, are we community game or not? Because we've had this kind of, we're essentially the community game because we're not paid, but the level that we play at makes us elite. So therefore, where do we stand? And there's a lot of discussion about, do we need all the testing, which means none of us will be able to play because the clubs can't afford to, put toilet roll in the toilets at the minute, never mind pay for the women's testing, which is not deemed particularly important part of the game at the current situation. But there's a new thing about the community game come out, and that could we see an 8-week league from October, through to the end of November. And I think there's a discussion about whether we're allowed to have an actual structured league versus just having friendlies. Doesn't matter at this rate. I just want to play a couple of games of rugby. I am so over Zoom sessions and online training. And we met up the other day. Quite a few of us. There was a big group of us. And we met up and we did our fitness session together, which is great to see. Obviously, because I doubt it. I've indulged in lockdown, shall I say, a lot, and I've come back from a hamstring tear. So last Thursday was my first sprint session that I got signed off to do, and it was nice to see that actually I'm not that unfit as I thought I might be. But it was great to see all the girls, and then we played a game of, Courtney brought a cricket stuff down. We played a game of cricket loosely because none of us are particularly brilliant at it, apart from Courtney and Francesca. And it was just great to be around the team again. And I think that's reminded me that, it doesn't matter whether we have a structured league or not. It'll just be nice to get a few games under the belt before we close the season and then restart pre-season. But no, there's nothing, is there? I mean, you probably know more than I do. But I just want to play a bit of rugby.
Yeah, as you say, that 8-week season seems to be the thing. Congratulations, 2 years of holding the Challenge Cup as well.
Oh, yay!
One day me and Phil will tell the full story of that day, which was full of hilarity behind the scenes. Phil and Pete Smith and the Yorkshire Evening Post nearly getting thrown out of the Halliwell Jones Stadium before they even got in.
Brilliant.
Which was good fun. Speaking of, and of course that was my career highlight of being on the BBC, they've done a survey today. Elite British sportswomen have spoken out about horrific abuse on social media. 30% say they've been trolled. Are you one of those, Danika?
Trolled as in?
Well, I don't know. People saying bad things to you.
I mean, people say bad things to me all the time, but I don't think it's my rugby. No, I got a comment in the gym the other day. I was doing some weights in the gym because the gym's open and I'm back in my happy place. And I lifted some weights and this guy was about, I don't know, he was lifting a lot lighter than me, and he just turned around and was like, "Oh, you're a man." And I just went and picked up some heavier weights and I was like, "Okay then, hon," and carried on. It happens. It's some men are a little bit threatened by athletic women, shall we say?
But of course, you do now have Claire Balding representing you as the new president of the RFL. So the women's game is actually going to be bigger than the men's by the end of 2 years' time.
Yeah, you hope so. And in her statement, it's about developing the women's game, which is fantastic. So come on, Claire, get your finger out and let's start pushing us to get us back and figure out where we're going to start. And I think what is really key going into next year anyway with the World Cup is a point, but just in general, we're riding this wave for the women's rugby. We were in a great place. We were building, with Claire coming on board anyway. We got the whisper, we heard about earlier in the year. This season was set to be bigger. Betfred came on board. The potential for this season was incredible. Building up to next season, we need to really find that momentum again. And I know there's so many problems in our sport now, and financially, and where we go from here. But that side, the women's game has managed with very little money before, and I'm sure we will do it again. But we just need to make sure that we can build back up and set the platform for the World Cup next year.
And apparently this BBC survey did involve some rugby league people, but it was anonymous, so we don't know who. But at least it was involved. They didn't receive any responses from equestrian, motorsport, shooting, taekwondo and gymnastics. Although I think, as we've seen in the news recently, gymnastics has a lot of problems it needs to sort out. Interesting fact here. Most sportsmen earn less than the national gross annual wage, with a third earning nothing. I earn less than the national gross annual wage as well, and probably someone should say I should earn nothing. But there you go. Have I missed anything else before we do the predictions? Because I realise we've gone on for a long time today. And everyone's probably turned off at the bit where we talked about politics, because they don't like that. But there you go. Right. It is prediction time. There are 5 games in the Super League. Hull Kingston Rovers get the bye this week, so they can rest and work out some more short kick-off tactics. We moved the Super League circus from Leeds to St Helens. We're off to the Totally Wicked Stadium, and we kick off on Saturday with the week-rested Huddersfield Giants taking on the Warrington Wolves. Let's start with Danika.
Oh, it's a tough one. But I'm going to go Warrington by 6.
Warrington by 6. Phil?
I think the week off is the key here. I think that they will have managed to probably look after some of the natural soft tissue injuries that come with just coming back to play. I think they will have reviewed that last 15 minutes where it all went wrong for them against Leeds, and they will have taken steps to counter that. They will have watched all the other teams and how they come to terms with the new rules. I think that at this stage of the season, to come in refreshed will probably benefit Huddersfield, and I will go Huddersfield by 4, which will upset all the Warrington fans that think I have a natural bias against them.
He does, doesn't he? Johnny hates Warrington. We all hate Warrington.
Yeah, he's got a picture of Steve Price up in his shot that he punches every day on the way in. I've seen it. No, I agree with Phil. I think Huddersfield will have a point to prove after the Leeds game, and with the extra week off, they should be pretty fresh and determined. So I'm going to go Huddersfield by 6.
I mean, as we know, I'm a big fan of our friends on the What Would Billy Boston Say podcast, but they'll appreciate that. But rather than go for Warrington, because we know, as always, I always say this, Simon Wolford watches this programme, and he was on the telly the other week. I don't know if it's made the column or not. He was on the telly playing for Canberra Raiders against the London Broncos in the World Club Mega Championship, which, of course, was a massive success, much like the Silk Cut Plate. Huddersfield to win by 8. That's followed 4:15 kickoff. Salford Red Devils, well, they absolutely destroyed Hull FC last week, and they take on the tiger-slaying Catalans Dragons, Danika.
Oh, don't do this to me. I'm not good at this. This is why I'm not a betting woman, because I just can't do it.
And there's only 3 options. Well, 2 options, really.
Well, it all depends on the weather, doesn't it? Because that might change my option.
Yeah,
but based on Tui's form, I think that Salford will take the edge just because they've not got the travel. The weather's not meant to be that great next weekend, so I'm going to give it to Salford. But I think it's going to be a great contest, and I think it's going to be quite close. I'm going to go Salford by 4.
Showers 21 degrees.
I think this is the game of the round on the form of the 2 teams in the one before. I'm tempted to go for Salford, but Sam's back, isn't he? And I think he will make a difference. He'll give an extra dimension to the Dragons. I think they'll take a lot of confidence from the manner in which they took Castleford apart in the last 40 minutes. So whilst I am incredibly impressed with the way Salford played, they will take a lot of confidence from that. And bearing in mind, we're making these predictions on a Monday. We have no idea what the squads will be. I'm going to go Catalan by 2.
Yeah, I think someone asked yesterday if I was a Salford fan, so obviously I've got to stick with Salford. Yeah, I thought they were tremendous. I think the travel will have an impact. And yeah, I think they'll be on a high after their confidence-boosting performance. So I'm going to go Salford by 2, but yeah, I expect it to be a pretty tight game.
Because it worked well last week going for Salford, I shall go for Salford again by 4. Let's hope we do get close games this weekend. The final game on Saturday, it's a repeat of the 1998 Grand Final, but will it be a repeat of the results as Leeds travel to take on Wigan, who make their home at St Helens, which is interesting. Go on, Danika. There you go. You just pick Leeds. It's easy enough for you to do this time.
Well, let's hope that Leeds have been whipped into shape this week. You know, let's hope we've got Connie back, Rob. I think it'll be a Leeds by, just because I've got to pick Leeds, I can never not pick them. That's where, as much as I disagree with myself sometimes, I'm going to go Leeds by 6.
Of course, it is a repeat of the 2015 grand final where the result was slightly different, but we won't mention that. It's going to, again, depend on available resources. There's word that Bevan French might not be fit, and that would take a lot out of Wigan's strike. We don't know who is going to be available of those that were missing. Leeds were abject this week, even adding to the fact that Saints were so good. Wigan, unconvincing, but got the victory in the way that Wigan do. Lockdown changed some things, but not the fact that Wigan can grind out a win when they don't play at their best. What I say about Leeds doesn't matter because clearly I'm not objective. But I will go golden point, extra time, and a draw at the end of it.
We've got to counteract these rhinos, lovers here.
Yeah, I don't. It's a pretty hard one to pick. I don't think Wigan were great in there, for the whole game, and then obviously Leeds were good for 15 minutes and then absolutely shite. Right? So, I'm leaning towards Wigan by 6 points, but really hard one to pick because I don't think Leeds can be as bad this weekend as they were on last weekend.
Yeah, 2015, of course, as good as it got. And I guess, Wigan out St Helens, are they? That's another good thing in Leeds' favour. You know what? I'm going to go with the Rhinos. I don't know why. We'll see. We'll see if I send that in the email to Matt anyway in the media tipping competition. But I'll go Leeds by 8. Oddly, Sunday scattered thunderstorms at the Totally Wicked Stadium just before kickoff as the Super League champions St Helens take on Wakefield Trinity. Danika, this will be easy for you.
I mean, you've got to be stupid if you're not going to go for Saints out, haven't you? Sorry, but Saints by 16.
I mean, Saints came out with no injuries as far as we can tell. They may get to the point after 3 games that they want to rotate some of the players in their squad just to keep them fresh. But I can't, at the moment, the mood that they're in, the way that they're playing, the speed that they're playing at, with the greatest respect to your Wakefield, Rich, I can't see them stopping them. I'm going to go... there is no advantage, but if you're going to have an advantage of being at home, it's the familiarity one. I'm going to go Saints by 20. Sorry.
Saints by 8.
It's like I'm playing for them or something. It'd be more than 20 if I was playing. Shall I go Wakefield because I always do? Yeah, I'm going to have to do, aren't I? But we did win there a couple of years ago with a lovely penalty try. I think James Charles was reffing on that day to put aside all those claims that he hates Wakefield. Because all the referees are completely unbiased and fair. It's what they do. Don't be an idiot and have a go at refs. I hope we do get to see Johnson versus Grace because that will be awesome. But Saints are the best team in the competition. They proved that last year. But I'm still going to say Wakefield because I do. By 2. And following that, 2 teams who are heavily beaten, but in different circumstances. 6:30 kickoff for Hull FC versus Cass. Who bounces back the best, Danika?
I think with the way that the game is going and the style of play now needed, I think Hull, they're just so big up and dominant up the middle that they're going to give too much away. So I'm going to have to go Cass. But I think it's going to be quite a good game. But I'm going to go Cass by 8.
See, all the people say you're anti-Cass. Nonsense.
And I don't even like Cass and I pick them.
Gareth O'Brien will make a difference. He will give Cass a dimension that they currently don't have. I suspect that the issue for Hull is that both Gareth Ellis and Andy Last have come out and said they've got an attitude problem. I think that's pretty dangerous 1 week into a restart competition. I think they're going to try too hard. I think they're going to overcompensate. I think that Cass will be more patient than they were last week, where they got 14 points up, but for a drop ball by Jesse Senelafeo, would have been in a better position to close that game out. Darryl Powell didn't seem overly bothered that they hadn't won. He was more stressing the fact that he thinks they'll benefit from the experience. I think they will. I think Castle win by 14, and we'll see a Matthew Elliott moment from Adam Pearson.
Yeah, I think Cass as well. I think they'll be much better this weekend. Gareth O'Brien's a good pickup for them. They probably will come straight into the team, perhaps, and he'll make a difference as well. And I think Cass by 6.
Now I'm going to go to the Tigers as well. One, they invited me to their post-match press conference this week, which the club did, which is fair because I'm not a proper journalist. Pays to know people on the staff, doesn't it? And they're better than Hull at the minute. As we saw before lockdown, they took Saints apart. Yes, they fell apart after 20 minutes against Catalans on Saturday, but I think we can put that down a lot to the skills of Israel Folau. Phil's worked out how to do emojis on this thing, which is quite concerning. So Cass by 8. Well, this is our longest show since lockdown. There's another one now. Applause. Is that the slow hand clap? Is that time to get up?
Blowing you a kiss.
Oh. That's even more concern. The magazine's out this week. What's in it?
Yeah, be out on Friday. I think one of the things we've tried to do for the last 5 issues is chart coronavirus and the effect that it's had on rugby league and professional sport. So I'm hoping that that's the last one, because we can now start moving on and talking about the game. But you'd want something like that to be a record in the past for people that say, what was it like? How did we get through it? And so again, that's in there, and I hope you enjoy everything else that is, including your pull-out World Cup wall chart.
Yay! Danika, what have you written about?
What was that, sorry?
Let me mute Phil again. Oh, he's muting himself. What have you written about in your column this month?
Oh, do you know what? Oh, I'm so proud of myself. I sent it to Phil ages ago. I've been so on the ball this month. We've got all sorts. We've got Claire Balding. We've got a bit of coaching. We've touched on Sharbuth.
I forgot to ask you how's she doing. You've been getting up early to watch her. I can't get up early.
Yeah, no. She's doing really well. Like, she's looking strong. It's just a completely different speed out there for her as well. The way that the NRL works for that, they all play their own little competition. So she's playing the Premiership competition, and then after that, the scouts then pick and recruit for the NRLW, and then from that, obviously State of Origin, which obviously Char's not eligible for. But yeah, I think she's. I'm not gonna lie, she's riding a bit of a tough wave at the minute. She made the choice to stay out there during COVID, which she's got no work. She didn't have any work or anything like that. She's gone in. I mean, John can probably tell me that I'm wrong here, but the Australian women are a little bit cliquey, and she's a new fresh blood, and they're not making it easier for her to fit in at the minute.
She's a pom.
Yeah, they're making it difficult.
They whinge a lot.
Yeah, well, yeah. They're a little bit, and it's very much everyone's fighting for a shirt. So as much as you're a team, it's also every man for themselves. And I think she's feeling that. Coming from a team like Leeds, which is the best, most unified team I've ever played on, to go out there and to basically have to fight. I mean, she's getting a shirt. She's starting at second row. She's getting the full 60 minutes because that's all they play out there. Yeah, she's doing great. So I've touched on that in the column, and so yeah, I'm ahead of the game this month.
And Brighton Beach.
Oh yeah, went down to Brighton, dipped my toes in the sand. So it's been a busy few weeks actually. I've enjoyed myself.
Well, good on her, and best of luck to her down there. And I hope she gets into the NRLW and then scores her first ever try in rugby league, because as we know, nothing counts in the Northern Hemisphere. John, now Toronto are done. What are you going to write about?
I don't know. There's always someone who's not paying their bills in rugby league, isn't there? So.
But we can find you in the usual places, doing the usual things.
Yes. All over and everywhere else on the internet somewhere.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much for your time, you three. Magazine obviously out this week. Read John's article about Toronto. What can we support you in, Danika? I don't know, in your endeavours on social media.
Nothing. I'm just I'm on my school holidays. I'm looking after a dog. The sun's been out. It just makes me happy when the sun's out.
Just don't follow her on TikTok.
I'm not. Do you know what? It's like a hype now.
The Chinese.
Continue dancing, and it's fine. Around the kitchen with my music on very loud.
Well, I'm going to retire from basketball anyway. That's all I've learned from this week. Thanks for watching and listening, and enjoy your rugby league, as Harry Grayson used to say at the end of the Super League show. Well, thumbs up from Phil. I hope these come out on video at the end. It'd be really good if they did.